All right. So once again, guys, welcome to QuickBooks. Today we're going to be taking a look into chapter 1, introducing you to what QuickBooks is and etc. and what components that you do need to know in order to go ahead and start off your QuickBooks. So first things first is, once again, in the past, what is this book actually primarily gear you towards is actually understanding how to use Premiere 2018. Now, of course, that was back then in the past. Now we're going to be looking in Accountant 2018. Okay? But that's okay. At the end of the day, most of the programs can do what each others do, and we'll talk about what the differences between the different programs are. So once again, you should be having this book, the QuickBooks Premiere 2018, but now it's not. But it is the fundamentals of QuickBooks, okay? And in this class, we will be taking a look at Academy Photography. That is the book's case study, okay? So we're going to be taking a look at sample files that QuickBooks or Intuit has provided us, and it's going to be taking a look at a small company, well actually it's a big company called Academy Photography, okay? Now once again, the book does give you another sample file of another case study. So if you looked at chapter 14, you'll take another look at Horizons, but primarily the entire book is going to be revolved around Academy Photography. Okay? Now here, QuickBooks product lines. So when we talk about QuickBooks products lines, these are what are available. And each one are going to be specifically geared towards a specific type of business. Now, how each one works for each one, which I'll talk about in a second, you just need to know that this is what QuickBooks offers, okay? So for 2018, since you guys are testing the 2018, you need to know these 5 for sure, okay? But as we go on forth, right, then you'll see that there's more than just what's listed here. So for example, you need to know that there are 5 that exists in 2018, that there is QuickBooks Online, there's QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise. Okay, now they may refer to Enterprise as Enterprise Solutions, okay, but for sure it is Enterprise, okay. And the one thing that it's a little quick tip here, or I guess the little things that you should know, is that Premier and Enterprise are the only 2 that actually use industry specific and they are able to produce industry specific business reports and things like that. Now, of course, we'll talk really briefly on what an industry is. An industry is basically when you establish your type of business, you belong to a specific industry. Meaning, for example, right, if you're a restaurant, you belong in the restaurant industry. If you're a retail clothing store, you belong into retails. If you're the kind that provides multi stuff, such as like Target, Walmart, right, that provides not only household goods, they also provide food, etc. That's going to be a multi-purpose type of organization. So those are just a few examples of what industry means. And for Premier and for Enterprise, now these ones, the reason why they're industry specific is because these ones are primarily geared towards corporations. All right. So again, when you establish yourself as a specific corporation, you do need to identify yourself in a specific industry. And so with Premier and Enterprise, what they do is they help you, build reports that are similar in the same industry as you. So for example, if I'm a retail store, therefore I should have, my sales. I should have sales for specific items. Okay. So that's what that means right there. Now, of course, if you go on to QuickBooks.com, they have way more items on here. Now, we'll talk about each and every single one, but the one thing I need you to know is that because with the vast majority, as QuickBooks progresses and creates more and more products, you will see things such as self-employed. You'll also see QuickBooks Live, or even QuickBooks bookkeeping, okay, or advanced. So once again, for your specific test, you are only needing to know these 5 different types: online, pro, premier, accountant, and enterprise. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about the difference between the desktop version and the online version. It's pretty straightforward in regards to basically functionality or how mobile things are. So of course, when you're purchasing the desktop version of the product, right, you're basically needing to be in some kind of office, computer, something, or a laptop even, that's able to, for you to have access to QuickBooks, okay? Where the online version, right, is pretty straightforward. Everything's done online for using an application, using the QuickBooks Cloud services. So everything is going to be online. It's a lot more accessible. However, there is a huge difference between the online and the desktop version. Okay, desktop, you're only limited to the space that you have on your computer, right? You can send your files over. Yes, you can. That's just as easy as well. But the only problem is that when you're dealing with desktop, it is very specific that you need to have the other person, or the other person that you're sending the files to, either have a similar or a higher version of your of the desktop. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. But let's pull away and talk about what it means to be an online service or using QuickBooks Online. So the difference here is that it is a subscription based, meaning you have to pay a monthly fee every month to maintain and having QuickBooks available to be online. Now, once again, we talked about how Intuit has their own QuickBooks Cloud, which stores data online in the cloud. Okay, so that means this is so much easier, especially when you're the kind of type of business that likes to travel. Okay, so this is definitely good because it's easy to use, it's feasible. It allows you to have access at any given time, anywhere you go, as long as you have some kind of internet source. And yes, you can access your files because it will always be saved into the cloud. Okay, and here, as you can see, there are 5 packages that you can subscribe to, right? Depending on how big or how small your business is. If you think that you're starting off your business very, very small, then you should definitely start with a smaller type of package. So for here, usually self-employed is usually what you should start off with. Now, let's say you are a big, huge company, then that's where you go progress to the advanced package. Now, of course, every time you advance to each package, the price of the monthly payment goes up as well. Now, of course, those numbers you can find online, right? Going to QuickBooks.com or Intuit.com/QuickBooks, and you'd be able to find these numberings and what the descriptions are in regards to what they offer you in each package. So as you progress in each one, basically what you're doing is you're just buying more and more memory or more storage space in the cloud, because each one is limited to the amount of names that you can place into the file. Okay, Now, the one thing about this is now QuickBooks is being a lot more flexible, right? Everything's on the go. You can download the application. You know, they have the new device where you could scan your receipts or scan your barcode, and it will automatically upload it to your files. So that's what's really cool about the online service, okay? The only difference here is that when you are selecting an online service, you are limited to what you can do versus to a desktop where you have full capabilities of doing almost anything. So you want to actually, so there's a few pros and cons towards using online. Another thing too is that, of course, if you're accessing things on the go, you definitely want to be very careful because your stuff can be at risk to being hacked. So that's definitely something that you definitely want to take, consider. Okay, but other than that, online is like so far right now it's greatly used. It's accessible anywhere, and you can do it while you're traveling, whether it's across the states or even overseas. You can access your stuff right then and there. Okay, and the bigger packages you go for, the more that you're able to enter in your data. So that's the only difference with online and desktop is that it's a monthly subscription, so you do have to make payments every month to have QuickBooks Online. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the desktop version. So the basic three that you typically will see is going to be QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Premier, and QuickBooks Enterprise. Okay, these three are what businesses look for. Okay, these three are basically based on what type of business that you are, and it also allows you to make executive decisions or other things such as reporting wise, right? You could build reports based on this information. So let's go ahead and break it down to see what the real details is here, okay? So according to 2018, right, Pro, Premier, and Enterprise. Pro is meant for small businesses. Anybody less than 50 people or just anything that's like a sole proprietor. Really, really small type of business, right? You would definitely go for Pro because the limited amount of names, so in this case, should be 14,500. But in your book for the 2018, that's for Premier. Pro and Premier is 14,500. Now, what are names? Names could be anybody that's involving in your business. So your customers, your vendors, your employees, the people that run your business. Those are all going to be considered names. And each name has a specific transaction. So those are going to be also considered items. Now, when we talk about that, think about it. If a small company can hold to 14,000 employees or 14,000 customers, right? You can see as a small business, that's a lot of room. You know, that's a lot of people in your business. But usually for a small startup company, that's general rule of thumb, right? You should at least have a couple thousand, customers, and you should have a few thousand vendors, whether they're independent contractors, people who are your suppliers. Okay, so 14,500 is a lot of people that could be under your list. Okay, and once again, for Pro, you can only have up to 1 to 3 users at one time. Okay. Now that's key that you know that, because especially when you start a small business, right? The real 3 people, if you had to list them out, would be 1 is going to be your accountant, 2 the boss, and 3 maybe 1 employee. Okay, so that's usually what it is. Now, this is using them at the same time. You can create multiple users, as many as you like, as long as they're an employee to you. But using them at the same time, you can only have 1 to 3 people using it at one time. Okay? Now, when we talk about Premiere, Premiere is primarily geared towards small/medium-sized companies, or LLCs, okay, or even limited liability partners, right? So anything that's a little bit bigger than a small startup company, right? You can have up to anywhere to 14,500 or any up to 1 million people or items on each list. So once again, as you progress in the size of your company, then you're obviously going to have more vendors. You're going to have more customers, and especially you're going to have you should have a wide set of employees. So therefore, you definitely need to have more, lists to be able to compute your transactions in QuickBooks. So definitely, as you progress in each desktop version, it just gives you more space and capacity of how many transactions that you could encounter. And once again, you can use anywhere up to 3 to 5 users at one specific time. So you can have everyone log on to the file at the same time. And you could also, the great thing about Premiere is that once again, you have over 150 industry-specific reports. So we talked about how Enterprise and Premiere are industry-specific. That's what I meant. Is like when you establish yourself, let's say I am a restaurant, it's going to pull up reports that are more geared towards your actual industry versus a basic generic one. So when we go into accounting, right, or for those who already took my accounting, what I did was we built basic generic accounting reports, right? These ones are industry specific, meaning anything that anybody that's in the restaurant industry will typically be able to produce reports that are specifically geared towards this. Okay, so they'll have like specific minor details that are making those reports more towards a typical restaurant. Okay, and then here there's also forecasting. Forecasting means making, projections for the future. You can predict with Premiere, and you can also have mobile tracking. So as I've mentioned before, right, we are looking into the new digital age where everything is more in the convenience of our hands, right? So whether we could do pretty much anything, right, with our phones, with our smartphones, if we have a smartphone, right? You can access the internet anytime. You can travel. Once again, all you have to do is just download an application, and you can pretty much do everything in the palm of your hands. Okay, so that's what the new QuickBooks is. Okay, for Premiere. Right? Now, Enterprise Solutions, once again, is meant for big publicly traded companies, corporations, right? The big people that have millions and millions of people involving in their company, right? They should have at least 1 million vendors, 1 million or even 1 billion customers, and they have to have at least a lot of employees. Corporations can have anywhere from 100 to 1,000 employees. So that is exactly why Enterprise can hold anywhere more than 1 million items per list. Okay, so it's like I've mentioned before, every single QuickBooks application, so whether it's Pro, Premiere, and Enterprise, it's going to be based on the company that you are and how much transactions you are going to be doing. Okay, so again, Enterprise gives you access for up to 30 users to be able to use at one time. So again, if you are working at a corporate office, right? You can expect the accountant's going to be involved in this. The sales representative is going to be a part of it. The marketing is going to be part of it. Payroll / HR is going to be part of it. Inventory manager is going to be part of it. You know, all of those types of people could be potential users that could use QuickBooks at the same time and access the file at one time. So that's pretty much on a really grand scale. Now, of course, with that being said, there's a few technical things that you do need to know if you are planning to have that, but we'll talk about that in a sec. We'll talk about that when we dive into chapter 12. And then, of course, same thing here. They do have over 150 specific or advanced reports. So it doesn't have to be specifically geared towards the industry itself. There's a lot more reports that you can do when you're looking at a corporate standpoint. So, you know, looking at your stockholders' equity, you know, things like that. You can run a lot of more reports based on you know, the company that you are. Of course, there's also forecasting. And once again, of course, with corporations, you have to be able to travel. Okay. So especially, so they kind of gear towards that mobile tracking. Now, all of these three things, right? Now, here in the previous one, I actually cut the price tags off of these ones because, you know, every year that we have QuickBooks, there's going to be a new price tag for every year. So it is a one-time fee. So what you're essentially doing is you're buying the actual program. Okay? So it's a one-time fee, and it is a one-time thing that you have to do. Where online, it's a monthly subscription. So therefore, you have to pay every single month. This is a one-time deal. You buy it, it's good for the next 3 or 5 years that you have your company for. Okay? So that's the only difference between them. Now, the price tags on these are very, very, very expensive. They're not very cheap. I think the lowest one is the Desktop Pro. I believe that's marketed at $199. Then it goes $299 and then $399 if I'm not mistaken. So they're not very cheap products, okay? And especially for corporations, right? You can't just have one, okay? And we'll talk about that, especially when we send our files to another person using the QuickBooks, right? If you have one desktop version on one desktop and you're a corporation and you allow access for 30 users, imagine how many QuickBook desktop licenses that you have to purchase in order to have all 30 of your members be able to have access to it. So again, it's very costly to run a business, and especially if you want to maximize your productivity, you have to consider how much it's going to cost you to buy all these licenses for all those people to have access to the QuickBooks file at the same time. Okay, so once again, that's going to be the cost of doing business. So once again, QuickBooks Desktop is going to be primarily geared towards buying the program and having it available for a couple of years. Okay. Now, the one thing I didn't mention about this is going to be the accountant. Now, you guys are getting the free trial. It's going to be for the accountant for the 2018 desktop. Now, the accountant can be you could be used as an online or a desktop version. However, it is geared towards a desktop, and it's actually meant for your tax accountant to have. Okay? Because the one thing about the accountant is that it can download every single different type of formats or different types of the product lines, right? I have QuickBooks Pro. I can open it with QuickBooks Premier, but then if I convert it back, I cannot open QuickBooks Pro or Premier into QuickBooks Pro. Okay? However, the accountant can open anybody's files. They can open any file from Pro, any file from Premier, and any file from Enterprise, and any file that's online. So the accountant is basically the big type of program that allows you to access every single type, and it's compatible and allows you to also export them in those specific ones. Now, because every single business, right, could be a small business or it could be a large business, right? It just depends on what they are. So that's why the accountant is primarily used for more of the major corporations that are the accounting firms, like for anybody that's filing taxes, would typically use the accountant version of QuickBooks because they can have access to any single company's file. Okay? Now, when I mentioned that, like, you can go from Pro to Premier, yes, you can. You can do Premier to Pro, right? The only thing is that if you do run your industry-specific reports, unfortunately, Pro cannot do that. So that's why when you do have these accessibilities to these types of desktops, you definitely want to be consistent for your company, right? If you have one computer that's got Desktop Pro, that means all the computers should have Desktop Pro. But if you decide to upgrade and say, well, this computer has Desktop Enterprise, then all of them need to have Enterprise, because that way it makes it easier and flexible for you to be able to maximize the use of the Desktop Enterprise and not be short selling when you use Desktop Pro. Okay? So that's just the difference between there, is that when you do have those specific programs, whether it's Pro, Premier, or Enterprise, you do need to be careful, because Pro cannot do what Premier could do, and Premier cannot do what Enterprise could do. But Enterprise can do everything that Premier and Pro can do, but even beyond that. So that's a few things there. But again, it's also based on your company and how much money you can afford. So that's why it's definitely something that you have to discuss with your boss, or if you are the boss of the company, which QuickBooks is going to be best fit for you. Okay. Any questions in regards to QuickBooks product lines? Okay. So here's a few things that I need you guys to learn. So in your book, as we progress through each and every single example and exercise, they do teach you how to use shortcuts. Now, for the test, if you use shortcuts, it will mark you wrong. Okay? The test wants you to be able to not do the shortcuts and do the long way. As in, if I need to enter in a bill, how many ways can I enter in a bill? You need to be able to click your mouse and drag to those correct paths. You cannot use the shortcut, all right? It will mark you wrong if you use the shortcut. The only shortcut that you will learn and need to know is going to be your F2 function key. So if you guys look at your keyboard, right, it should be the numbers or the keys above your numbers. Okay? So F2 is the function 2 key. And what it does is it gives you your product details and information. So you know if you're going into your company, right, and you've never used their company file before, you could just quickly press the F2 button and it will tell you exactly what the details are in this specific product. It gives you the exact product line, meaning right here for the example, if you look here, it says that I have QuickBooks Desktop Pro 2019, okay? And it even tells you the day that I downloaded it. I downloaded it October of 2018, all right? And it also tells me what release number it is. So release numbers are very important. Release numbers basically tells you how many times you've actually updated it. Now, a release is the same thing as, when you find bugs or something wrong with the program. So what happens is that for avid users of QuickBooks, they go to the support section or they go to like a discussion board and they relay this problem they have with the QuickBooks function, whether it's a bug or like they try to click on something and nothing's working. So once they do that, QuickBooks they release a patch. And a patch basically resolves that little issue that the program is having. So here at the very top of my window, it says QuickBooks Pro 2019 R1, meaning I have never updated my QuickBooks since I've downloaded it, okay? And once again, what this does and what this entails is that the release number just only pretty much tells you that how often you update your QuickBooks. Now, don't confuse between update and upgrade. Upgrade is where you're moving from Pro to Premier or to Enterprise. That's to upgrade your program. Update is just to basically any patches, any bugs that they find within the program. When you update your file to the newest release, it just patches. You're basically downloading an extra component that works with the actual QuickBooks itself. So when you do those function keys or those transactions, it works instead of, bugging out. Okay, so that's just that little important thing that you need to know is that when you go ahead and use your function key, you could see the product line when you download it, but also what release number it is. So right now, I'm still at 1. Okay? It even gives you your product license code and everything. So in case for any reason that you need to switch from a different laptop because, I don't know, for any reasons, you always have your license and product code number with you at all times in this actual specific one. Now, especially when you go call into it and you ask them to help you out with support and things like that, that's the first thing they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you what's your product code and what's your license number. So they can look it up into their system to ensure that you are an actual member and this is a legitimate code that you've downloaded into the system. And they can access your product from their computer. Okay, so it's very important that you have this piece of information, and how to look it up is pretty straightforward. F2 key function. Okay. Now, there's also a few things that you do also need to know as well, is that I think they changed this for the newer program because 2021, we've experienced that you can open up files that are older, but according to the 2018 version, you can only go back 3 years prior. And what I mean by this is that, so we talked about the different years, right? Let's say I have a QuickBooks 2015 file, and I have the QuickBooks 2018. I can open anything dating that far back. However, if I have a QuickBooks 2011, that will not work. It cannot convert it. And if it did convert it, you're going to lose a lot of data. The reason being is because, like I've mentioned before, the QuickBooks versions from 2018 and between 2018 to 2020, right? there's only a very significant difference between the program. Whereas QuickBooks 2011, and you're trying to open it in 2018, that file is so outdated, it doesn't have the same function keys, and because it's so far out, it's unable to access that file just because of the new keys that are function. It's a completely different program after it's been 3 years. So that's exactly why they say that you can do retroactive, or you can open up files that are 3 years prior. Now with the 2021, you can go actually further out, because the difference between the 2018 all the way up to 2021, there's not that much difference. Okay? But however, that's just the general rule of thumb, is because of how outdated the QuickBooks is, unfortunately, you cannot bring those files out. Now, if you had a 2011 and you opened it up in a 2015, what you essentially did was you've converted it into a 2015. Once you've done that, then yes, you are able to convert it once again to a 2018, and then once again to a 2021. So, but if you were to do that, that means once it's in its greater or, newer edition of QuickBooks, you are unable to open it with a past one. So if you have it now, once you've converted it up to the most latest and greatest, that means if I go back and I say I'm going to use 2018, you can't open the file anymore. It will not be opened because you've upgraded it to the newest software. So that file has been updated. So that's just a few little fun facts, and that's exactly why, as a company, if you're going to purchase a bunch of licenses, your general rule of thumb is everything needs to be the same, consistent, and you can't be using multiple different types of QuickBooks in order to get your company by. They need to be consecutive, the same product throughout all the computers, okay? Because of those difficult things that you may have to come into encounter, okay? Now, that doesn't mean when you buy the desktop versions of QuickBooks, that absolutely doesn't mean you have to renew your license or you have to purchase a new updated version every year. Most cases, because they have that 3-year rule, you're good and solid for every 3 years, okay? So like I said, once again, if you're a corporation and you're having to make those expensive costs because you need to provide that program for 30 plus users, you can only expect that's $1 million you might have to spend just to buy the QuickBooks application for all your users. You can expect they're not going to be willing to pay $1 million every year. They're going to wait it out and say, well, QuickBooks 2018 is still functioning today, so there's nothing wrong with it, so I won't upgrade it until it hits 2021. Okay, so that's one of the things that you can do, and that's usually what the program is for, is to make sure that companies don't have to put so much money into their programs. But they do it because, again, every year there's always new businesses popping up. So that's why they always have a new QuickBooks version every year. Okay? So once again, that's a cool thing about, but it's also a fun fact that you should know. Okay? Any questions in regards to this particular section? Okay. All right. So for those who have the accounting experience, this is review for you. Okay, or took the accounting class with me previously or another session. So this is review for you guys. But for those who are going into the accounting, this is what you're going to be expecting. Now, once again, I've mentioned this before. You absolutely do not need the accounting background in order for you to use QuickBooks. Okay? However, if you do have the accounting knowledge or the accounting background, it's only benefits you because you can take advantage of QuickBooks and make it work for the way that you want it to work, because you can manipulate it to reflect exactly how you want it. Okay? But for most cases, if you are going to another company, which I think I mentioned this earlier, the company is going to groom you and teach you exactly how they want their books to be done. So therefore, there is no reason for you to have to need the accounting background if they're going to teach you exactly what to do. But of course, if you have the accounting background, you can obviously apply for better positions. And instead of being the person who just does the billing, you could be the person that is the overseeing accountant itself. So once again, you absolutely do not need accounting background to do QuickBooks. However, it does help. Okay? It only advances you up a little more. Okay? So once again, the accounting focus. Okay? So the main goal of accounting is it helps you understand and analyze a typical business transaction. So here we take a look at making a sale, right? Or making a purchase of inventory. In order for you to sell the items in your store, right? Just assuming that we are a retailer business, we need to make purchases of inventory before we can convert that into money. So that's the real definition of accounting, is analyzing, sorting, and interpreting business transaction to be able to create our reports and to be able to produce useful information for us to use for accounting. Now, one thing about this is that you do need to know that accounting is general, because it not only does it teach you the actual nature of the business, it's actually the backbone of all businesses, right? You need to know how much money you have in order to be able to make those expenses for you to run the operations of your business. You also need to know that when you do business, you have liability, which means that you can owe people money, or maybe if you had a bank loan, then you owe money in order for you to operate your business. And the last thing is going to be your equity, which is, it actually it determines the value of your company, right? So that's why the accounting focus here is to just really truly understand how a transaction actually works. Okay, so once again, I've mentioned the accounting equation. So the accounting equation is going to be the total amount that everything that you own is going to be equal to everything that you owe and the value of your company. Okay, so once again, assets is everything that you own, right? It's whether you own furniture, you own the building, you own the inventory, you own the cash, patents, copyrights, whatever. Anything that's considered ownership. Okay, a liability is going to be considered everything that you owe in regards to maybe a bank loan, right? That's not your money, it's someone else's money that you borrowed. You owe that person, okay? And then you're going to notice that when you go into a company that you are intending to sell to your customers, you definitely are allowed to owe your vendors money, because you may need to make purchases of your inventory and you may not have the money to pay right away. Or you want to take advantage of the opportunity of not paying right away. So either way, that's going to be considered a liability. A business credit card is going to be something that is going to be considered a liability, right? You're borrowing money and you're going to pay it back. And then, of course, your equity is going to be the value of your company. You could also view your equity as your net worth. What is your company worth? Okay? And this is the essential backbone of your business itself. Okay? Now, with that being said, we also have to break down the different 5 types of accounts that exist in accounting, right? So again, we talked about assets, we talked about liabilities, and we talked about equity. Now, we're going to talk about 2 additional accounts that exist. It's going to be your income / revenues. So in QuickBooks, it's going to be referred as your income. Okay? In accounting, you can interchange them because they mean the same thing. Revenues and income are the same thing. It's how you generate money that for you to be able to run your business. It's how you generate your money. Okay? And that's your income. Expenses are going to be anything that you encounter in order to have your operations run. So a perfect example of an expense would be rent expense, right? How are you going to have customers come to your store if you can't pay for rent? So rent is going to be considered an expense that you need to take or encounter in order to operate your business. Expenses. Straightforward, okay? There's only 5 and 5 only. No more, no less. So you need to know these 5 account types because this is going to be very, very crucial, especially when we dive into our chart of accounts, which we talk about in chapter 12, okay, which is tomorrow. So once again, your chart of accounts is going to consist these 5 account types. Assets, everything that you own. Liabilities, everything that you owe. Equity, so again, if you're looking at a corporate standpoint, your stock is going to be considered your equity, right? And then you got your income, and then you have your expenses, okay? So once again, this is what a chart of accounts typically looks like. So I'm just giving you a pre-exposure of what the chart of accounts looks like, but we will take a look at it in chapter 12. So the chart of accounts is a list of every single account that you need in order for you to organize or keep track of your business transactions, okay? So this is created by the accountant themselves, okay? So that means when you are going through your business and you are recognizing that you need a specific account for you to organize your transaction. So for example, I sold a product to my customer, okay? Therefore, if I sold something, that's a sale, right? I generated income, right? And my counter to that would be I received some form of money. So with that being said, every transaction will consist of 2 or 3 or more accounts. And each one is where you're going to distribute your money into those respective accounts. And that's how you keep track of all the money that you received, all the things that you owe, all the inventory that you sold. You need to create these accounts to help you organize your business transactions. And how is this chart of accounts organized? It's organized according to account type. Okay? Hello? Yes. 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 You had a question? Okay, so once again, coming back to this. So once again, the chart of accounts. We'll talk more in depth in chapter 12 because chapter 12 we get to look at setting it up. So this is going to be in order based on account type. So that means your assets are going to be at the very top. Your liabilities are going to be right after. Your equity, your income, and then your expenses are going to follow right after. So once again, we'll take a look at an example tomorrow on how to set up a chart of accounts and go on and so forth, okay? But this is definitely, you need to have the chart of accounts before you can actually conduct your business transaction. As in, like, you can't just enter in a bill straight from scratch, you need to enter in that you have an accounts payable account, and you need to have an accounts, a cash account, whatever, all those accounts. You need to set those up first before you can actually put in your transaction. Okay? And then once again, we're going to be taking a look at the double entry system. So for those who were in the accounting program, right? You guys got to take a look at this firsthand. We utilize the double entry system, right? Where if we have one flowing debit, we need to have an equal and opposite credit, okay? So therefore, we can be dipping into multiple accounts. Now, how QuickBooks does this is that they actually use a single entry method. That's why I told you guys, don't forget, single entry does exist, okay? But we'll talk about it in a second. Now, the rule of thumb here is that your debits must always equal the total number of your credits, okay? That's the double entry system, is that once again, if you have a total debit, you need to have an equal and opposite credit. So again, this is also applied physics, right? If there's an action, you need to have an equal and opposite reaction. That's the same thing that applies here. That's the number one rule, is that your debits must always equal your total credits, okay? Now, of course, when we're dealing with QuickBooks, right, this is usually how a typical business transaction would look like, right? So this is called a normal balance. So this is, again, for my accounting people, this is definitely something that you guys know, okay? And for those who don't know it, especially for those that are going to go into learning it later on, it's kind of tricky to understand, but as we progress to figuring out how this works, like for example, right, when I said we made a sale, right, that means we've increased our income, right? How we determine to increase our income is based on what side that you increase it on. So in this case, we always refer our left as debit and our right as credit. So in this case, I'm going to be increasing my credit because I generated revenue, okay? And my equal and opposite is going to mean I'm going to increase my asset because, or my debits on my asset sides, because I should have received some form of payment, whether it's cash or someone owes me money. So in this case, that's how we interpret a transaction, is that when we realize that we have a sale, if you sold a product to somebody, your first thing that you should think about is, how did I get paid? Did I sell it for a price? Did I trade something for it? In this case, because we're doing business, you should always think that you're always going to get money by selling a product, okay? So that's what this normal balance does. And once again, this is only pertinent for accounting, okay? But for QuickBooks, guess what? QuickBooks will do the whole work for you without you even doing anything, okay? And that's the next slide over. Is like, what? Okay, over here. Okay, so QuickBooks will do all the work for you behind the scenes. So in this case, when we talked about the difference between a double entry and a single entry, right? Single entry is where we just enter in one piece of information, right? So in this case, we'll be entering bills, right? We're not going to physically say this, okay, so when a bill comes, right, usually it's linked with an expense or whatever, and you owe money for it in general, okay? Usually so when we place in a bill and we enter it into QuickBooks, we're only entering it in once, and we're just only recognizing that we owe this person money. Therefore, that is considered a single entry mode. And the QuickBooks is going to automatically figure out the equal debits and the equal credits for you to process the transaction. So in this case, you don't even need to know anything about accounting. And that's precisely exactly why I was telling you. If you have the accounting experience, it only benefits you because you get to manipulate QuickBooks how you want it. But if you are not going to be going into the accounting program, you don't need to know it. Because ultimately, all you need to know is how to enter in a bill. Because the QuickBooks is going to automatically do the accounting for you in the background. Okay? So they're going to be calculating all the debits and the credits for you behind the scenes. Okay? And then we talked about the difference between the cash and the accrual basis. So cash basis is pretty straightforward. Cash basis is when you're only involving all of your things are going to be just revolving around cash. So you only recognize your revenues when cash is received. You only recognize your expenses when cash is used or spent for that expense. Okay? Where we learned about what's the accrual accounting. Accrual accounting is where we understand that when a transaction has happened, we record it regardless whether we received payment or not. Okay? Same thing when let's say a contractor decides to complete a task for us. Once we receive the bill, we must record that something has incurred regardless whether we paid or not. So that's the difference between cash and accrual basis is one, the criteria is you always need to have cash for every single transaction that you do. Where the other one doesn't matter whether you have cash or not. The idea here is, did the transaction occur? All right? And for most businesses and most corporations, your automatic assumption is that you will always be an accrual basis at all times, just because we have the vast majority of, credit cards, right? We have credit cards. We have people that we allow our customers to owe us money. So that's all going to be considered an accrual type of business, right? We recognize our transactions whether we received payment or not. We record that an expense has occurred whether we paid or not. Okay? And that's the idea here. Okay? And we'll talk more in depth about that in the book, because in the book it tells you the specific details on the cash versus the accrual basis. Now, if you're a small mom and pop shop, your best rule of thumb is that you should start off as a cash basis, because technically it's true, right? If you're going to buy a bunch of, purchase expense for inventory, right? You kind of need to have the money in order for you to make those purchases. Okay, you can't just be owing a bunch of money if you know for sure that you're not going to be able to make those payments on time. So definitely, it's definitely something you need to consider, especially on how small of a company you are and whether you're generating enough revenue. That's usually the most important part when you're dealing with a cash to accrual basis. But for accrual basis, if you're a strong enough company that you're making you're generating the revenues that you need to make, and you're paying off your expenses on time, that's when it's safe to be able to use an accrual type of accounting. Okay? So once again, the QuickBooks does the accounting behind the scenes for you, so you don't really need to do anything except for entering in your information. Okay? Any questions in regards to the Accounting 101 section? Okay.
So I have a question. So what is a debit expense though?
I'm sorry, say it again?
What is a debit expense on this accounting? Is it a cash basis or
Okay,
accrual?
so it will depend. Did you pay with cash or did you place it on an account? Okay.
Place it on account, yeah.
If you place it on an account, like you owe them money, right? And an expense has occurred, you would typically would record it as an accrual basis. But let's say you had to pay in cash. You received the bill and you paid in cash. Then you're going to record it as a cash basis. So in this case, you can only use one or the other. Now, like I said, usually small mom and pops businesses that usually only accept cash, right? How do you think they pay for their bills? They pay with cash. They have to. Okay? So in this case, you can only choose one or the other. You can't be both a cash and accrual basis. You can only be one. So it really depends on how strong enough, especially with your cash flows, how strong your company is. Okay? For cash basis, right, for small mom and pop shops, they can only record everything in cash because that's the only way they can operate their business. So it's also depending on how you operate your business. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we're going to talk about QuickBooks files. There are 3 types of files that exist in QuickBooks, but I'm going to tell you that it's not really 3, it's really just 1. Okay? So first, I'm going to just talk about the first thing is that when you are looking at creating a company file, which we will do tomorrow, you're automatically creating a data working file, also known as QBW, right? QB, QuickBooks Working Data File, or workbook, whatever you want to refer it as. Okay, and usually this is where you're constantly updating all your transactions and you're doing primarily all the work on the working data file. Makes sense, right? Because this is the one that you're going to be constantly updating. It's the one that you're constantly going to be accessing, and it's the only one that you're going to be using. Okay. Now the other 2 that we have here, a QuickBooks backup file and a QuickBooks portable file, basically what you're doing is you're just converting the working data file, and you're either creating a copy of it, which is the backup file, right? So it's very important, especially when your business is revolving around many transactions, and especially when you have multiple people using that exact file. You definitely want to save all your work, especially because QuickBooks, right? Here's a little fun fact. You nowadays, you cannot operate QuickBooks if you do not have access to the internet. So if you don't have internet and you open up your file, you're only going to be able to just look at the home page, and that's it. You're not going to be able to enter in any single file because it needs access to the internet. And because it's always being connected to the internet, therefore, that is the reason why QuickBooks will always automatically save your work. You don't need to memorize that Control-S button anymore. You don't need to constantly save anymore. QuickBooks will do it automatically for you as long as you have access to the internet. Now, once again, that is exactly why it's very important that you know your exact product code and license number, is because, yes, it's using Intuit's intellectual services and putting and saving all that work on the platform that comes with when you purchase your Intuit account or the desktop version. It's automatic. Okay, that's a little key factor that you need to know. You need to have access to the internet at all times. Okay, that's how it saves it. However, there are many times if many people use it at one time or the internet drops out on you, what happens? Your computer crashes. You will lose your data file at any given time. Okay, especially when you have multiple people use it simultaneously. Your dangers there is that if too many people are using it, and boom, the internet cuts out one time, you're probably going to lose all your transactions amongst all those computers that are using it. Okay. And of course, a little fun fact there too, if you do have your multiple users on, you allow to have the file to be accessed by multiple people at one time, you have to know that you all have to be on one single network, meaning you need to be at the office that can put you guys all on one internet line or a cable, right? The network. So that's why there's a little IT. You cannot do remote, like you can't be at home and be able to access the file at the same time as the users that are at the office. It has to be all in one area in a local network, right? If you've ever taken a class for it, you should know that there is what's called a WAN and a LAN, local area network. That is what I'm referring to. You need to all the computers must be onto one single network in order for you to be able to spread and share this exact data file amongst with your other users at the same time. Okay, but of course that's the reason why we build backups and portable files, right? Backups is to save your data as you go. Now it's very important that you always back up your data, and we'll talk about that when we close the books at the end of the cycle. And then portable data allows you to take this working data file and convert it into a small little file that you can send over email, place it on a website, make it easy, accessible to download. Because once again, a working data file is going to be extremely heavy, especially the more you keep adding more information, transactions, whatever it is. You can only expect that it takes forever just to open up a file because of how heavy it is. So same thing for Excel, right? If you, or Excel. If you have too many workbooks or too many worksheets in that workbook, you can expect how long it will take you to open it. Same thing with any document. If it's 1,000 pages, how quickly can you open that file? And that's why it's important that you know that a backup exists and a portable file exists. Now, we're going to talk about how you open those files, but when you open those files, ultimately, you're going to open them and you're going to either create a working data file. So basically what you're doing is you're constantly compressing and then opening it once again and decompressing it. So once again, your ultimate one that you need to know is that the one that you're updating at all times and the one that you're working on will be your working data file. Your backup file, right? You can lock it up and save it in the storage in case your computer crashes and you don't want to lose all the information that you typed in. That's definitely what that backup is for. And you can back it up to a local disk, which is your computer, or you can save the backup on a flash drive, a portable disk, okay? But once again, it will be just as heavy as the working data file. Whereas if you do a portable file, which that's exactly what I had you guys download, right? It's a shrinked and compressed version of the working data file that allows you to send it over the internet. And then once you open it, you're going to convert it back into a working data file. Okay? So make sure that you are aware of that. And we will get to take a look at using all three. Okay? Any questions? No?
Yeah. So when you said that QuickBooks automatically saves your data,
Uh-huh.
and if the computer crashes, so that means if you don't put it on a flash drive or save it on a disk, it won't be saved still.
Yes, that's correct. If it crashes on you, it won't work. No. So, for example, many times, like when I've taught this class, right, the internet will drop. I would have to reopen the file, and sometimes it will save it, sometimes it will not.
Okay.
It just depends on like how many people are using it, what the transaction is. But most cases, while I'm teaching the class, sometimes it won't remember the last thing I put in there, but it will remember the other steps I did before that. Usually, that's usually what happens. It only doesn't save the last part that you just did. But
Okay,
that's,
because
go ahead.
and sometimes if you update it, like you want to be saved this every certain minutes, so you don't when that happens, you still got. I mean, you won't get the last 5 minutes that you were doing it, saving it, but the other part should be saved. Is why I was asking.
Yes, and you can schedule, which that's going to be in chapter 12, I believe. You
Okay.
can schedule. No. Yeah. No, yes, it's going to be chapter 13. I'm sorry. Chapter
It's
13.
fine. It's fine. I was just concerned because I mean they did on one class they told me you can save your data in and if QuickBooks automatically saves it as soon as you put it in. Why I was kind of mixed up on that one. Thank you.
Yeah. As long as you have access to the internet, your data file should be updated and saved automatically. But for any times that you do come to that situation where it does crash on you, that's exactly why it's encouraged for you to always create a backup file.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's so bad that the working data file is so corrupted that you can't even open it.
Okay.
Once that happens, then your only best bet is to go back to your backup file to be able to not lose all of your data. Now, of course, we'll talk about this chapter 13 where you can schedule frequent backups, whether you're using the program or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So now the next question is, well, how do we even open a file? So usually when we're at the QuickBooks, this is usually the first screen that you will see. You will see and you'll be asked 3 questions or 2 questions, right? Are you going to create a new company file or are you going to open an existing data file? Okay. So of course, when you get to this homepage, you're always going to see this first. Okay. You're going to choose if you are creating your company file, which is chapter 12. Okay, so I'm going to skip that for now. If you choose to open an existing file, here are the 3 options that you get. You're going to be asked to either open an existing data file, a backup file, or you're going to be asked to open up a portable file. Okay? And usually if you are currently working on a data file, you just click on that and it will open up the work that you were just looking at earlier. Now, how to restore a backup, right? Once again, once we click on this, here's the thing that you need to know. When we click on it and we click on next, it's going to ask you to save where you need to go and save it, right? So you can create your working data file, right? We talked about how it converts into that. Now, second thing is, well, in order to create that backup, right? How do we know if we have a backup file? In order to create one, right? It's pretty straightforward. You go to File, and you're going to go ahead and click on Backup Company, and it's going to give you the option. You want it locally or you want it portable, or save it on a different place. You definitely want to do a local backup because that just tells you that it's going to save it somewhere on your desktop. Straightforward. That's all that local means, is that it's going to be on your desktop. Now, of course, you could click on your flash drive and be able to save it there as well. You just definitely want to be very careful with that because once again, the flash drives that you were given, they're not that much space. But if you have a personal flash drive at home, make sure that you check the spacing on it because when you do a backup file, essentially it's just saving the working data file as a copy. That's all that is. Okay, so however big the working data file is going, your backup's just going to be just as big. Okay. Then the second,
Okay, so I have a question. I have a
yes.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so kind of going back, it relates to both. So,
Which, okay.
QuickBooks should allow for us to set up multiple companies. Say if we were operating freelance, did just hear you say a few minutes back that in order to go live with a client, you would have to be on the same network with them, correct?
Oh, okay. So, if yes, well, if you're working with a client, they would have to send you a copy of their work. But if you're doing QuickBooks Live, that's a completely separate program. I'm not an expert at it. But go ahead and continue your question.
But what I mean by being live, we talked about saving files and backing up files, but the only time, when you have different users that's operating out of that file, we all have to need be on the same for it to be live, right? Versus us just put some data into a save file and then making sure it transfers over later. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. So, again, backup files is going to be based on, it's most likely going to be on the accountant's desktop. Okay. Now, yes, if all of you guys are all currently on that workbook, unfortunately, yes, you have to tell everybody to get off the computer, log off, and what you're going to do is you're going to go up to your file and you're going to switch to multi-user to single user. And then you can go ahead and process your backup from there. So yes, if that was your question, yes, unfortunately, you can only have one person doing the backup to save everybody's work. But you can't back it up when everybody has access to it because you're not going to save everybody's work. That's correct. Okay. So we'll talk about switching to multi-users, I believe, tomorrow. Okay. So, yes, that's how you back it up. Now, so we talked about the other file, right? How do you create a portable file? Or in this case, open up a portable file. So we're going to take a look at that throughout this entire course. We're going to be constantly practicing going into our files, locating our portable files, and we're going to open it. Okay? Now, first off, how do we create one in the first place? So in this one, the verbiage is a little different. So here, we're still going to go to File, but now the question is, we're going to click Send. Okay? Who are we sending this to? Once you click that, it's going to give you two options. You can either create a portable file or an accountant's copy. Now, once again, QuickBooks is primarily geared towards taxation. So QuickBooks makes it even more easier that you can make an accountant's copy. So when you send it to your accountant, they have access to all your information in your QuickBooks. Okay? But you can also create a portable file. Let's say I need to work on it at home. Okay? What I can do is I can send myself or email it to me and I can work on it at home and figure out what I need to figure out and then send that copy back to the actual company, right? So that's the thing that you can do here is that when you go click on send the file, those are the two options that you have. And in this case, we primarily are gearing towards portable files. Once again, a portable file shrinks the working data file into a very, very tiny file that makes it easy to send across emails, as well as, uploading it on a website, whatever it is that you need to have. And that's exactly why the first thing that I wanted you guys to download for the student practice files is to download the portable files because they're small enough, and when we convert them into a working data file, that's where we're going to be constantly entering in or going through the exercises together. So that's how you create a portable file. Okay? Any questions in regards to opening or creating those 3 working files. Okay. Once again, we will be practicing opening the portable file, and we will take a look at saving a backup company file. Okay, and we will also tomorrow, we're going to actually start creating our company file. Okay, so we're going to take a look at all three.
Okay.
All right, user interface. Now, as I've mentioned before, we talked about how when we enter in things into QuickBooks, it's as if we're doing it as a single entry data. So what does that even mean when we talk about single entry? So here are the ways that you can enter in a transaction, all right? I'm going to talk about the main page right here. You see this little big, huge screen right here with like little lines and arrows and stuff and icons. That's called the home page. On the left side in blue, in that list, that's called your list. And then at the very, very top of the window, you have in gray, that is going to be your menu bar. Straightforward, okay? Now let's talk about each and every single one. Your home page is going to be your number one go-to place to enter in majority of your transactions. As you can see, it is a graphic depiction of a transaction, right? Let's take a look here. Let's look at the icon where it says under customers, it says create your invoice, right? Let's follow that arrow. Once you create the invoice, right, you bill your customers. That's what creating an invoice is, right? Therefore, the next arrow says that you're supposed to receive a payment. Once you receive a payment, it's going to go directly to the deposits, okay? So the home page is pretty much the first and easiest way to enter in any transaction, right? You need to enter a bill, boom, there's an icon for that. You need to create an invoice, boom, you got an icon for that, right? You need to purchase inventory, boom, you got purchase orders right there, okay? And let's say you need to pay your employees, boom, you have an icon for that, okay? So the home page is pretty much your easy shortcut for every single transaction that you have here, that most commonly you would operate, right? So for example, you have your purchases of inventory, you have your sales, and you have your payment to your employees. Okay. Then we have the icon bar. Your icon bar usually is going to be your left aligned panel, okay? And basically what it is, it's shortcut to specific things. So we're going to talk about what a register is. We're going to talk about what a center is, okay? And basically these are shortcuts so you can access that quicker. All right? It's not the transaction. So let me tell you this. It's not a shortcut to the actual transaction. That's what the home page is for. It is to help you get to a register or to a center. So for example, right, we here have like the calendar, right? You have a bill tracker, income tracker, which we'll talk about. It's basically a way for you to access the main page before the transaction happens. Okay? That's what the icon bar does. Okay? And we'll take a look at it and you'll understand it more as we go through the lesson. Okay? And then last but not least, we have the menu bar. The menu bar is literally going to be the list of every single transaction that exists in QuickBooks. Every single one of them, okay? So your home page will only show you the majority use. Your menu bar is going to give you every single transaction that exists, okay? And of course, the menu bar, right, it's pretty straightforward. You click on it, it will give you a drop-down list. And then from there, you search the transaction that you're looking for. Okay? And again, everything will make more sense as we continue going forward. Now, let's talk about what a center is. Okay? centers are pretty much things that just keeps you, I guess, as a collective, like once again, it holds the transaction that you will need to encounter. So the most important three centers that exist here in QuickBooks is going to be your vendors, your customers, and your employees. So in this case, those are just the three that are most important. Of course, there's the report center, there's the inventory center, there's other centers that do exist in here, but these are the most primary three that you will commonly use mostly. Okay, so of course, your vendor center, it's pretty straightforward, and we'll talk about this in chapter 4. It's a list of all of your customers with their information, their contact information. It gives you a list of their account balances, and when you click on them, you can create transactions that involve with your vendors. So once again, it's a place that holds the transactions that are geared towards a particular person. So in this case, my vendors, it's going to hold all the transactions that I need to compute with a vendor. Okay. Yeah. And then any questions in regards to that? Okay. All right. Now, okay. Are you guys still there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Next part is going to be entering transactions. So there are a total of 3 ways that we can enter a transaction. Okay. First one is going to be a form. So it's exactly like going into the doctor's office, right? You need to fill out that form that lists your name, your phone number, etc., right? And that's exactly how this works as well. You fill in the blanks. So in this case, for this example, I'm filling out a purchase order, right? I need to fill out who is my vendor. I need to fill out what the date is. I need to fill out what items I'm buying, what the quantity I'm buying, how much is each item that I'm purchasing. Okay? So like I said, like I've mentioned before, it's just like filling out a doctor's form. You're filling in all the blanks, and that's exactly how you enter in a transaction. That's one of them. Okay? So this one's a pretty straightforward one, and this is the one that we will practice. Now you're going to notice a lot of things that QuickBooks makes it a lot easier as we fill out the forms. This is probably the easiest way to enter in a transaction because you don't need to do a lot of thinking. All you need to do is, like I've mentioned, fill out the blanks, right? Especially when you're dealing with a specific transaction, right? If I'm filling out a bill, right? What's this bill for? When is the date that they sent the bill? Who sent the bill? Okay? Pretty straightforward when you're filling in a form. Okay? Another way that you can enter information is through a list. Okay? Now here, we'll take a look at this when we dive into chapter 4, I believe, where we enter in our vendors. You can enter them in simultaneously or at multiple times, or like multiple things at one time. Okay, so that's how we enter in our list. Now, another key factor that you're going to notice is that when we fill out our forms, it's going to appear in a list. Like you're going to see that's going to autofill for you. That's also using lists to help you fill out your forms, okay? That's also one of the things that we're going to be talking about is that there are a set of lists that we need to create in order for you to be able to create your items or your specific transactions. That's also one of the things that you can enter in a transaction by using lists, okay? And we'll talk more about that when we dive into chapter 12, I believe, yes, or chapter 7 when we customize our list. Okay. And then last but not least is going to be a register. Register, right? We'll talk about registers in tomorrow because there's few specific things that you do need to know when you're dealing in a register. So it's exactly like filling out a general ledger or a general journal. Okay, you're gonna fill in the date, you're gonna fill in the components such as who the vendor is or the customer that you're dealing with, and what was the transaction at hand. In this case, was it an expense? Was it payment? Was it a purchase? So, and then you're going to put the amount in there, and it's going to automatically update your balance. So once again, this is very similar to entering in data, such as a general ledger, right? We're constantly adding it into this register, and it's going to constantly update our amount right as is. And we're associating the accounts that are associated with it, the people that were involved, and the amount that were involved. So once again, we'll take a closer look at this when we dive into chapter 4. All right, when we get to take a look at our first transaction with a vendor. Okay. And then QuickBooks Help. So once again, if you guys, since I guess some of you guys are beginners and some of you guys are experts at QuickBooks, with this being said, you always will run into a situation where you do need help. All right, so if we go to the menu bar, you have the help menu. You click on that and it's going to give you all these options that you can seek help for. Now, for most, I guess, productive way of getting specific help is that you use the help icon, the help button here, and you click on get the or find a local QuickBooks help support person, right? Because if you do it through the program, it's automatically going to send somebody all your information, such as your product and license number. So when the person comes and assists you, they can assist you and know and figure out your problem with you instantly, okay? You can go to quickbooks.com/support and be able to talk to somebody there, right? You have that live chat box, or you could actually call their phone number and get connected to somebody who can help you, whether it's desktop support, online support, or whether it's your Intuit account support. You can, that for my experience, that is usually the better way to go. Just know that you have to provide your information, such as your product number and your license, and you need to tell them what the issue is, okay? Now with that, you not only do you can have support help for that, this is also where you can update your QuickBooks as well, upgrade your QuickBooks, learn more information about any subscriptions or any product information, right? It's also where you can also, if you want to resolve the help on yourself, like you actually do it yourself and figure out what the issue is, you can look at the little guidelines or the little manual that the QuickBooks has itself, the frequently asked questions. You can take a look at that. And then you can even search up what the issue is, okay? So the help is actually very, very useful for those who are more avid users of QuickBooks. But it's also good to know that this is also where you can update or upgrade your QuickBooks as well without having to go through the Intuit, homepage, Intuit, and then have to download it from their services there. You can just get quickly, directly linked right here by clicking upgrade your QuickBooks to QuickBooks Premier. Okay? All right. Any questions in regards to that? Okay. So here are the review questions for chapter 1. All right, first question here. Okay, so this is where everyone comes and participates. So you'll be shouting out the answers here, or A, B, or C, or D. All right, so first question here is the fundamental accounting equation that governs all accounting is?
be C.
C, assets equals liabilities plus equity. That is correct. Okay. Question number 2. Okay. Which of the following statements is true?
C.
C. So Nilo says C. Anybody else? Okay, let's go through each answer then. Debits are bad because they reduce income. Well, first, that's an opinion, right? Debits are not always bad because, and on top of that, okay, so in this case, it says debits are bad because they reduce income. Now, in this case, it's, once again, it's an opinion, right? We can't consider all debits are bad just because they reduce income, because they also reduce liabilities. Is that a bad thing? Is it bad that you reduce what you owe? No. So in this case, this is a very opinionated one because it's saying that debits are bad. But in this case, they don't always reduce everything. They can increase other accounts. So in this case, A is definitely not true. B, equity is increased by a net loss. Now, this is definitely an accounting question that you do need to know in regards to the accounting process, but we will learn this in chapter 13 when we close out our books. Equity does not increase by a net loss. It actually increases with a net profit. A net loss would decrease equity, right? And equity is going to be the value of your company. So we're going to take a look at what happens when our company gains a profit, right? And we reinvest into our company. It's going to increase the value of our company. Okay? Debits minus credits equals 0. So in this case, if you know that your debits must equal your credits, therefore the difference between them is going to be 0. So that's actually true. Assets are increased with a credit entry. If you looked at your accounting model, that is definitely not true. So C is the correct answer. Okay. Question number 3, okay, under the accrual accounting. So the question here is which one is true?
B.
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 Okay, good. Okay, so we talked about this, right? Income and expenses are recognized whether we receive money or not. The minute it happens is when you record it, and that's exactly what B definition is, right? A says a sales will not be recognized until cash is paid. No, that's cash basis. Okay, all expenses is not recorded until you write a check. That's cash basis. Right? And D, you must maintain 2 separate accounting systems. That has nothing to do with this at all. So in this case, B is the correct answer. Okay. Number 4, QuickBooks is
All of the above.
all of the above. Yes, it is a job costing system, right? We'll talk about job costing in chapter 2 and more for chapter 9. Okay, it's a payroll system that is dealing with chapter 10 and 11. And then lastly, C, a double entry system. Yes, it is a double entry system. It just does it behind the scenes. All right, but when we as a user enter in the data, we are using a single entry. Okay, but QuickBooks is a double entry because it does the debits equals the credits behind the scenes. When you enter in a transaction, It does it for you. Okay, so D, all of the above is correct. Last but not least, which is not a method of accessing the data entry screen.
B.
Okay? Which one is not?
D.
Did you got
It's D, I guess.
D? Okay.
Say D.
Okay. So the question is, which is not a method of accessing the data entry screens? So once again, so in this case, it's kind of worded a little funny, but that's what your book says. If I were to reinterpret this question for you, my question would be, how do you enter in data? Or how do you enter in a transaction? Or which of the following is not a way?
B.
Okay. So D would be the correct answer. So not is key here. So your QuickBooks certification, they're going to ask you a lot of negative questions, meaning they're always going to ask you what is not. Okay? So again, we talked about 3 ways, right? We talked about the menu bar, right? The top gray line. We talked about the home page, and we also talked about the icon bar. Never in this entire PowerPoint have I mentioned a data entry button. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. So D is the correct answer because we're looking for not a method. Okay? All right, good job, everybody. All right, so that concludes today's lesson. Any questions for chapter 1?